Welcome to O Horror. It's time to explore the depths of your mind, your sanity, and your fear. I hope you're sitting comfortably. Enjoy. The jar. It was one of those things they keep in a jar in the tent of a sideshow on the outskirts of a little drowsy town. One of those pale things drifting in alcohol plasma, forever dreaming and circling with its peeled dead eyes staring out at you and never seeing you. It went with the noiselessness of late night and only the crickets chirping, the frogs sobbing off in the moist wasteland. And one of those things in a big jar that makes your stomach jump like it does when you see an amputated arm in a laboratory vat. Charlie stared back at it for a long time. A long time, his big raw hands hairy on the roots of them, clenching the rope that kept back curious people. He had paid his dime and now he stared. It was getting late. The merry-go-round drowsed down to a lazy mechanical tinkle. Tent peggers back of the canvas smoked and cursed over a poker game. Lights switched out and putting a summer gloom over the carnival. People streamed homeward in cliques and queues. Somewhere a radio flared up, then cut, leaving Louisiana's sky wide and silent with stars peppering it. There was nothing in the world for Charlie but that pale thing sealed in its universe of serum. Charlie's loose mouth hung wide open in a pink wheel, teeth showing, eyes puzzled, admiring, wondering. Someone walked in the shadows behind him, small beside Charlie's giant tallness. "Oh?" said the shadow, coming into the light bulb glare. "You still here, bud?" "Yeah," said Charlie, irritated his thoughts were touched. The carny boss appreciated Charlie's curiosity. He nodded at his old acquaintance in the jar. "Everybody likes him. In a peculiar kind of way, I mean." Charlie rubbed his long jawbone. You ever consider selling it?" The carny boss's eyes dilated and closed. He snorted. "Nah, brings in customers. They like seeing stuff like that. Sure." Charlie made a disappointed "oh." "Well," considered the carny boss, "if a guy had money, maybe." "How much money?" "If a guy had..." The carny boss estimated, squinting eyes, counting on fingers, watching Charlie as he tacked it out, one finger after another. "If a guy had 3, 4, say maybe 700 or 8. Charlie nodded with each motion, expectantly. Saying this, the carny boss raised his total. "Maybe 10 or 15? Charlie scowled, worried. The carny boss retreated. "Say a guy has $12. Charlie grinned. "Why, he could buy that thing in that jar," concluded the carny boss. "Funny thing," said Charlie. "I got just $12 in my denims, and I've been reckoning how looked up to it be back down at Wilder's Hollow if I brung something home like this to set on my shelf over the table. The guys would sure look up to me then, I'd bet." "Well, now, listen here," said the carny boss. The sale was completed. With the jar put on the back seat of Charlie's wagon, the horse skidded his hooves when he saw the jar and whinnied. The carny boss glanced up with an expression of almost relief. "I was tired of seeing the damn thing around anyway. Don't thank me. Lately I've been thinking about funny things. But don't mind me. I'm a big mouth so-and-so. So long, farmer." Charlie drove off. The naked blue light withdrew like dying stars. The open dark country night of Louisiana swept in around wagon and horse. The brass merry-go-round clanking faded. It was just Charlie, the horse, timing his grey hooves and the crickets. And the jar behind the high seat. It sloshed back and forth, sloshed wet, and the cold grey thing drowsily slumped against the glass, looking out, seeing nothing. Charlie leaned back to pet the lid. Smelling of strange liquor, his hand returned, changed and cold and trembling, excited. He was bright scarlet happy about this. "Yes, sir." Slosh, slosh, slosh. In the hollow, numerous grass-green and blood-red lanterns tossed dusty light over men huddled, chanting, spitting, sitting on the general store property. They knew the creak bumble of Charlie's vehicle and did not shift their raw, drab-haired skulls as he rocked to a halt. The cigars were nicotine glowworms, their voices were frog mutterings in summer nights. Charlie leaned down at an eager angle. "Hi, Clem. Hi, Milt." Lo, Charlie, they murmured. The political conflict continued. Charlie cut it down to the seam. "I got something here. I got something you might want to see." Tom Carmody's eyes glinted, green in the lamplight from the general store porch. It seemed to Charlie that Tom was forever installed under porches in shadow, or under trees in shadow, or, if in a room, then in the farthest niche, shining his eyes out at you from his dark. You never knew what his face was doing, and his eyes were always funning you. And every time they looked at you, they laughed a different way. "You ain't got nothing we wants to see, you dumb sheebar." Charlie made a fist with a blunt knuckle fringe. "Something in a jar," he went on. "Looks kind of like a brain, kind of like a pickled wolf, kind of like a... Oh, look, come look for yourself." Somebody snickered the cigar into a full pink ash and ambled over to look. Charlie grandly elevated the jar lid, and in the uncertain lantern light, the man's face changed. "Hey now, what in the hell is this?" It was the first thaw of the night. Others shifted lazily upright, leaned forward. Gravity pulled them into walking. They made no effort except to keep one shoe before the other, to keep from collapsing upon their unusual faces. They circled the jar and contents, and Charlie, first time in his life, seized upon some strategy and clapped down the lid with a glass clatter. "You want to see more? Drop around my house. It'll be there," he declared generously. Tom spat from his porch, irie. "Ha! Let me see that again," cried Gramps McKenna. "Is that a brain?" Charlie flapped the reins and the horse stumbled into action. "Come on round. You're welcome." "What'll your wife say?" "She'll kick us off our heels." But Charlie and Wagon were gone over the hill. They stood around, all of them, chewing tongues, squinting after. Tom Carmody swore softly from the porch. As Charlie climbed the steps of his shack, carrying the jar to its throne in the living room, he thought that from now on the place would be a palace. The incumbent king swam without moving in his private pool, raised, elevated upon his shelf over the skinny table. This jar was the one thing that dispelled the grey sameness that hung over the place on the swamp rim. "What have you got there?" Teddy's thin soprano turned him from his admiration. She stood in the bedroom door, glaring out, her thin body clothed in a faded blue gingham, her hair drawn to a drab knot behind red ears. Her eyes were faded like the gingham. "Well?" she repeated. "What is it?" "What's it look like to you, Teddy?" She took a thin step forward, making a slow, indolent pendulum of hips. Her eyes were intent upon the jar, her lips drawing back to show feline milk teeth. The dead pale thing hung in its serum. Teddy snapped a dull blue glance at Charlie, then back at the jar, once more at Charlie, once more to the jar, and then she whirled quickly to clutch the wall. It looks like... It looks just like you, Charlie," she shouted hoarsely. The bedroom door slammed behind her. The reverberation did not disturb the jar's contents, but Charlie stood there, longing after her, neck muscles long, taut, heart pounding frantically, and then, after his heart slowed a bit, he talked to the thing in the jar. "I work the bottom land, the buttons, every year, and she takes the money and rushes off down home visiting her folks 9 weeks at a stretch. Can't keep hold of her. And she and the men from the store, they make fun of me. I can't help it, if I don't know the ways to hold or touch and work her. Damn, but I try." Philosophically, the contents of the jar gave no advice. "Charlie?" Someone stood in the front dooryard. Charlie turned, startled, and broke out a grin. It was some of the men from the general store. Charlie, well, it's that... Well, you know, we thought, well... We came up to have a look at that stuff you got there in that jar." July passed warm and it was August. For the first time in years, Charlie was happy. as tall corn growing after a drought. It was gratifying of an evening to hear boots shushing through the tall grass, the sound of men spitting into the ditch prior to setting foot on the porch, the sound of heavy bodies creaking across it, and the groan of the house as yet another shoulder leaned against the doorframe, and another voice said, as a hairy wrist wiped clean the questioning mouth, "Can I come in?" With elaborate casualness, Charlie invited the arrivals in. There'd be chairs, soap boxes for all, or at least carpets to squat on. And by the time crickets were itching their legs into a summertime humming, and frogs were throat swollen like ladies with goiteries shouting in the great night, the room would be full to bursting with people from all the bottomlands. At first, nobody would say anything. The first half hour of such an evening, while people came in and got settled, was spent in carefully rolling cigarettes, putting tobacco neatly into the rut of the brown paper, loading it, tamping it, as they loaded and tamped and rolled their thoughts and fears and amazement for the evening. Gave them time to think. You could see their brains working behind their eyes as they fingered the cigarettes into smoking order. It was kind of rude church gathering. They sat, squatted, leaned on plaster walls, and one by one, with reverent awe, they stared at the jar upon its shelf. They wouldn't stare sudden-like. That would have been irrelevant. No, they kind of did it slow, casual, as if they were glancing around the room, letting eyes fumble over just any old object that happened into their consciousness. And, just by accident, of course, the focus of their wandering eyes would occur always at the same place. After a while, all the eyes in the room would be fastened to it, like pins stuck in some incredible pincushion, and the only sound would be someone sucking a corn cob, or the children's barefoot scurry on the porch planks outside. Maybe some woman's voice would come, "You kids get away now, get!" And with a giggle like soft, quick water, the bare feet would rush off to scare the bullfrogs. Charlie would be up front, naturally, on his rocking chair, a plaid pillow under his lean rump, rocking slow, enjoying the fame and looked-up toneness that came with keeping the jar. Teddy, well, she'd be seen way back of the room, with the womenfolk and a bunch of, grey grapes abiding their menfolk. Teddy looked like she was ripe for jealous screaming, but she said nothing. Just watched the men tromp into her living room and sit at the feet of Charlie's, staring at her, this holy grail-like thing, and her lips were set as 7-day concrete, and she spoke not a civil word to nobody. After a period of proper silence, someone, maybe old Gramps from Crick Road, would clear the phlegm from his old throat's cavern, lean forward, blinking wet his lips. Maybe, and there'd be a curious tremble in his calloused fingers. This would cue everyone to get ready for the talking to come. Ears were primed. People settled much as sows in warm mud after the rain. Gramps looked a while, measured his lips with the lizard tongue, then settled back and said, like always, in a high, thin man's terror, "Wonder what it is. Wonder if it's a he or a she, or just a plain old it. Sometimes I wake up nights, twist on my corn matting, think about that jar sitting here in the long dark, think about it hanging in liquid, peaceful and pale like an animal oyster. Sometimes I wake me more and we both think of it." While talking, Gramps moved his fingers in a quavering pantomime. Everyone watched this thick thumb weave and the other heavy-nailed fingers undulate. "We're both laying there thinking, and we shivers. Maybe a hot night, trees sweating mosquitoes too hot to fly, but we shivers just the same and turn over trying to sleep." Gramps lapsed back into silence, as if his speech was enough from him. Let some other voice talk the wonder, awe, and strangeness. Duke Mama from Willow Sump wiped sweat off his palms on the round of his knees and softly said, "Remember when I was a runnel-nosed boy? We had a cat who was all the time making kittens, Lord almighty. She'd have a litter every time she turned around and skipped the fence." Duke spoke in a kind of holy softness, benevolent. "Well, we usually gave the kittens away, but when this one particular litter busted out, Everybody within walking distance had 2 of our cats by gift already. So Ma busied on the back porch with a 2-gallon glass of water. It slopped in the sunlight. Ma said, "Joke, you drown them kittens." I remember I stood there. Kittens mewed, running round, blind, small, helpless and snuggly, just beginning to get their eyes open. I looked at Ma, I said, "Not me, Ma, you do it." But Ma turned pale and said it had to be done and I was the only one handy. She went off to stir gravy and fix chicken. I picked up one, a kitten. I held it. It was warm, it made a mewing sound. I felt like running away and not ever coming back. Duke nodded his head now, eyes bright, young, seeing into the past, making it stark, chiselling it out with a hammer, a knife of words, smoothing it with his tongue. I dropped the kitten in the water. The kitten closed his eyes, opened his mouth, trying for air. Remember how the little white fangs showed, the pink tongue came out, the bubbles with it, and a line to the top of the water. I know to this day the way that kitten floated after it was all over, drifting round and round, slow and not worrying, looking out at me, not condemning me for what I'd done, but not liking me neither. Hearts beat fast, eyes shifted quickly from Duke to the shelf jar, back to him, up again. A spectator's game, like one sees at a tennis tournament, interest changing from moment to moment apprehensively. A pause. Jadu, the black man from the Heron Swamp, tossed his ivory eyeballs like a dusty juggler in his head. His dark knuckles knotted and flexed, grasshoppers alive. "You know what that is, you know. I tells you, that am the centre of life, sure enough. Lord believe me, it am so." Swaying in a tree-like rhythm, Jadu was blown by some swamp wind nobody could see or hear or feel save himself. His eyeballs went round and again, as if loosened from all mooring. His voice needled a dark thread pattern, picking up each person by the lobes of their ears and sewing them into one unbreathing design. From that, lying back in the mid-a-bamboo sump, all sort of thing crawl. It put out hand, it put out feet, it put out tongue and horn and it grow. Little bitty amoeba, perhaps. Then a frog, with a bulged throat, fit to bust. Yeah, a slobber up on its gummy joints and it a man. That am the centre of creation. That am mid-a-bamboo mama, from which we all came 10,000 years ago, believe it. 10,000 years ago, reiterated Granny Carnation. It am old. Look at it. It don't worry no more. They know better. It hang like pork chop in frying fat. It got eye to see with, but it don't blink 'em. And don't look fetid, does it? No, man. It know better. It know that they done come from it, and we is going back to it. What colour eyes has it got? Grey? No, green. What colour hair? Brown? Black? Red? No, grey. Then Charlie would give his drawling opinion. Some nights he'd say the same thing, some nights not. It did not matter. When you said the same thing night after night in the deep summer, it always sounded different. The crickets changed it, the frogs changed it, the thing in the jar changed it. Charlie said, "What if an old man went up to the swamp, or maybe a young kid, and wandered around for years and years, lost in the dripping trails and gullies, the wet ravines in the nights, skin a-turning pale and making cold and shriveled up, being away from the sun. It kept withering away, up, and finally sunk into a muck hole and lay in a kind of solution like the maggots, skeeters seeping in liquid. Why, for all we know, this might be someone we know, someone we pass words with once for a time. For all we know." A hissing from among womenfolk back in the shadow. One woman standing, eyes shining black, fumbling for words. Her name was Mrs. Tridden. She said, "Lots of little kids
runs stark naked into the swamp every year. They runs around and they never comes back. I almost got lost myself. I lost my little boy. If only that way. You don't suppose...
Breaths were taken in, snatched through nostrils, constricted, tightened, mouths turned down at corners, bent by grim facial muscles. Heads turned on celery stalk necks, and eyes read her horror and hope. It was in Mrs. Tridden's body, wire taut holding onto the wall back of her, with her straight fingers stiff.
My baby,
she whispered. She breathed it out.
My baby, my Foley. Foley, is that you? Foley, tell me, baby, is that you?
Everybody held their breath, turning to see the jar. The thing in the jar said nothing. It just stared, blind white out in the multitude, and deep in raw-boned bodies, a secret fear juice run like a spring thaw, and the resolute ice of calm life and belief and easy humbleness was cracked down the middle by that juice, and melted away in a gigantic torrent. Someone screamed,
It moved! No, it didn't move, your eyes are just playing tricks. Tone's the god, cried Duke. I saw it shift like a little dead kitten. Hush up now. It's been dead a long time. Maybe since you was before you were born. He made a sign, screamed Mrs. Tridden, the mother woman. That's my baby, my Foley. My baby had got there. 3-year-old he was. My baby lost it white in the swamp.
The sobbing broke out of her.
Now there, Mrs. Tridden, now there. Set yourself down and stop shaking. Ain't no more your child than mine. There.
One of the womenfolk held her and faded out the sobbing and into jerked breathing and fluttering of her lips into butterfly quickness as the breath stoked them over, afraid. When all was quiet again, Granny Carnation, with a withered pink flower on her shoulder-lengthy grey hair, sucked the pipe into her trap mouth and talked around it, shaking her head to make the hair dance in the light.
All this talking and shoving words, like as not we'll never find out. You never know what it is. Like as it's not we could find, we wouldn't want to know. It's like them magic tricks them magicians do at the show. Once you find the fake, it ain't no fun. And the innards of a jackbob. We come collecting around here every 10 nights or so, talking, social-like, with something, always something to talk about. Stands to reason, we found out what the damn thing is. Be nothing to talk about, so there. Well, damn to hell, rumbled a bull voice. I don't think it's nothing.
Tom Carmody, standing as always in shadow, out on the porch, just his eyes staring in, his lips laughing at you dimly, mocking. His laughter got inside Charlie like a hornet's sting. Teddy had put him up to it. Teddy was trying to undermine Charlie's social life, she was.
Nothing, repeated Carmody harshly. In that jar, but a bunch of old jellyfish from Sea Cove, and rotting and stinking fit to help.
You mightn't be jealous, Cousin Carmody? Asked Charlie, slow.
Ha!
Snorted Carmody.
Just come round to watch you dumb sappers talk about nothing. I gets a kick out of it. You notice, I never set foot inside or took part. Going home right now. Anybody want to come along with me?
He got no offer of company. He laughed again, as this were a bigger joke, how so many people could be so dumb, and Teddy was raking her palms with angry nails back of the room. Charlie felt a twinge of unexpected fear at this. Carmody, still laughing, rapped off the porch with his high-heeled boots, and the sound of crickets took him away. Granny Carnation gummed her pipe.
Like I was saying before the storm, that thing on the shelf, why couldn't it be some of all things? Lots of things. What they call a gimlet. Symbol? That's it, symbol. Symbol of all the nights and days and the dead cannebrake. Why is it to have to be one thing? Maybe it's lots.
And the talking went on for another hour or so, and Charlie bedded down with mixed emotions. The meeting had gone off well, but what about Teddy and Tom Carmody? Very late, with certain star conveys shuttle down the sky, marking the time as after midnight, Charlie heard the shushing of the tall grass, parted by her pendulum lips. Her heels tacked soft across the porch, into the house and into the bedroom. She lay soundlessly in bed, cat eyes staring at him. He couldn't see them, but he could feel them.
Charlie?
He waited. Then he said, "I'm awake." Then she waited.
Charlie?
"What?"
Bet you don't know where I've been. Bet you don't know where I've been.
It was a faint, derisive sing-song in the night. She waited again. She couldn't bear waiting long though, and continued.
I've been to the carnival over Cape City. Tom Carmody drove me. We talked to the carny boss, Charlie, we did. We sure did.
And she sort of giggled to herself secretly. Charlie was ice cold. He stirred upright on an elbow. She said,
We found out what was in your jar, Charlie.
insinuatingly. Charlie flumped over, hands to ears. "I don't want to hear."
Oh, but you got to hear, Charlie. It's a good joke. Oh, it's rare, Charlie,
she hissed. "Go away," he said.
No, sir, Charlie. Why no, Charlie, honey? Not until I tell.
"Go," he said in a low, firm voice. "Away."
Let me tell. We talked to that carny boss, and he liked to die laughing. He said he sold that jar and what was in it to some hick for $12, and it ain't worth more than $2 at most.
Laughter bloomed in the dark, right out of her mouth, a kind of awful laughter. She finished it, snapping quick.
It's just junk, Charlie. Liquid rubber, paper mache, silk cotton, chemicals, that's all. Got a metal frame inside it, that's all. That is all it is, Charlie. That's all.
She thrilled in triumph. No. He sat up swiftly, ripping sheets apart with big fingers, roaring, tears coming bright on his cheeks. I don't want to hear, he bellowed over and over. She teased.
Wait until everybody hears how fake it is. Won't they laugh? Won't they flap their lungs?
He caught her wrist. You ain't gonna tell them?
Ow, you hurt me.
You ain't gonna tell them?
Wouldn't want me to be known as a liar, would you, Charles?
He flung her wrists like white sticks into a well. Why should you leave me alone, you dirty, jealous, mean of everything I do? I took shine off your nose when I brought home the jar. You didn't sleep right till you ruined things. She laughed nastily.
I won't tell anybody, she said.
He caught onto her. You spoiled my fun. That's all that's counted. Don't matter if you tell the rest. I know. And I'll never have more fun. You and that Tom Carmody, him laughing. I wish I could stop him laughing. He's been laughing for years at me. Well, you just go tell the rest. The other people now. Might as well just go have your own fun. He strode angrily, grabbed the jar so it sloshed, and would have flung it on the floor, but he stopped, trembling, and let it down softly on the spindly table. He leaned over it, sobbing. If he lost this, the world was gone, and he was losing Teddy too. Every month that passed, she danced further away, sneering at him, funning him. For too many years, her hips had been the pendulum by which he reckoned the time of his living. But other men, Tom Carmody for one, were reckoning time from the same source. Ed was standing, waiting for him to smash the jar. Instead, he petted and stroked it and gradually quieted himself over it. He thought for the long good evenings of the past month, those rich evenings of camaraderie, conversation moving about the room. That, at least, was good, if nothing else. He turned to Dee. She was lost forever to him. Dade, you didn't go to the carnival?
Yes, I did.
You're lying, he said quietly.
No, I'm not.
This jar has to have something in it. Something besides the junk you say. Too many people believe there's something in it, Teddy. You can't change that. The carny boss, if you talk to him, he lied. Charlie took a deep breath and then said, Come here, Teddy.
What do you want?
She asked suddenly.
Come over here. No, I won't.
She took a step closer towards him.
Come here. Just keep away, Charlie.
Just want to show you something, Teddy. His voice was soft, low, and insistent.
Here, kitty. Here, kitty.
Here, kitty. It was another night about a week later. Gramps and Granny Carnation came, followed by young Duke and Mrs. Tridden and Jardu, the coloured man, followed by all the young, old, and sweet and sour creaking into chairs, each with his or her thoughts, hope, fear, and wonder in mind, each not looking at the shrine, but saying hello softly to Charlie. They waited for the others to gather. From the shrine of their eyes, one could see that each saw something different in the jar, something of the life, the pale life after life, and the life in death, and the death in life, each with his story, his cue, his lines familiar, old but new. Charlie sat alone. "Hello, Charlie." Somebody glanced around the room, into the empty bedroom. "Where's your wife? Gone off again to visit her folks?" "Yeah, she runs off to Tennessee. She'll be back in a couple of weeks. She's the darndest one for running. You know, Theddy. Great one for ganting around, that woman." Soft voices talking, getting settled, and quite suddenly, walking into the dark porch, entered Tom Carmody. Tom Carmody, standing out the door. Knees sagging and trembling, arms hanging and shaking at his side, staring into the room. Tom Carmody, not daring to enter. Tom Carmody with his mouth open, not smiling. His lips wet and slack, not smiling, his face pale as chalk, as if it had been kicked with a boot. Gramps looked up at the jar, cleared his throat, and said,
"Why, I never noticed so definite before. It's got blue eyes." "It's always had blue eyes," said Granny Carnation. "No," whined Gramps. "No, it didn't. It was brown last time we was here before."
He blinked upwards.
"And another thing, it's got brown hair. Didn't have brown hair before." "Yes, it did,"
sighed Mrs. Tridden.
"No, it didn't. Yes, it did."
Tom Carmody, shivering in the summer night, staring at the jar. Charlie glancing up at it, rolling a cigarette, casually at peace and calm, very certain of his life and thoughts. Tom Carmody alone, seeing things about the jar he never saw before. Everybody seeing what they wanted to see, all thoughts running in a fall of quick rain.
"A baby! A little baby!"
screamed the thought of Mrs. Tridden.
"A brain!"
thought Gramps. Coloured man jigged his fingers.
"Made a bamboo mama."
The fisherman pursed his lips.
"Jellyfish!" "Kitten, here, kitty, kitty."
Thoughts drowned, clawing in Duke's skull.
"Kitten!" "Everything and anything!"
shrilled Granny's wheezed thought.
"The night, the swamp, the death, the pallid moist things of the sea."
Silence, and then Gramps said, I wonder if
it's a he or a she, or just a plain old it."
Charlie danced up, satisfied, tamping his cigarette, shaping it to his mouth. Then he looked at Tom Carmody, who would never smile again in the door. "I reckon we'll never know." "Yeah, I reckon we won't." Charlie smiled. It's just one of those things they kept in a jar in the tent of a sideshow on the outskirts of a little drowsy town. One of those pale things drifting in alcohol plasma, forever dreaming and circling, with its peeled, dead eyes staring out at you and never seeing you.